Alon, Duality Technologies' mission is to empower organizations to do secure digital collaboration. So, how about we start with a brief overview of Duality Technologies and its products?
Sure, definitely. And first of all, thanks for having me. Duality is a company that, as you said, allows our customers to basically utilize data analytics, machine learning, AI, or any way of deriving value out of data while doing it in a collaborative setting, meaning the ability to really combine data from multiple sources, break down data silos within organizations or between, and basically utilize multiple data sets or multiple models to derive value and doing it in a way that the data or the model is protected while using it through this AI or machine learning exercise.
And this is a known problem within organizations, but maybe let's talk about it a little bit deeper. What kind of challenges organizations see when they try to collaborate on data?
Sure. So let me first look a little bit back at the history of data utilization and move forward to where we are today. So if we really look at the last even 3 or 4 decades, we saw this evolution in the space of data utilization from maybe 2, 3 decades ago, where companies were becoming digital and collecting data, moving into using it. And in terms of using it, we saw a few ways, the BI, the business intelligence wave, then the machine learning wave, and probably where we are today is really starting to see how data science or machine learning or AI is really used to drive the organizations forward. And the next kind of evolution or next step here is really the ability to combine data from multiple sources. We as human beings do it a lot. Whenever we have a problem in front of us, we combine data, we combine inputs from many, many different types of domains and concepts. And the same when you do it in the business context. You want to typically bring data from multiple sources. If you're a company that operates across the geographies, you want to bring it from multiple geographies. Sometimes within your own company, you have different data silos. And so the collaborative data science challenge is really this need to work on data in a collaborative setting. Now, a little bit more specific, we see three typical challenges in the space. So the first challenge is when an individual or business comes to utilize or create an AI or machine learning model. So let's just take a very simple example. Let's say as an individual, want to get a better diet recommendation, and you, Artem, have the best kind of model to recommend on a diet for me. And in order to do this, you need for me to upload medical data, some my lifestyle data, maybe genomic data. You need some data about me to predict and give me my best kind of diet suggestion. Now, in this kind of setting, if I want to consume your output of the model, I have to share this data with you. So challenge number one is, can I consume models? Can I buy the insights? Can I buy the value of the model without really the need to disclose my private information? Okay, so that's kind of challenge number one, be it in a consumer setting or in a commercial setting. Can one consume AI, consume machine learning while protecting its own data? And we'll talk about it when we look at, of course, the huge changes in the world around language models. Can I really basically utilize an OpenAI, for example, machine without disclosing any of my private data? That's kind of challenge number one, I would say the most basic one, where an entity consuming some kind of AI doesn't want to disclose its own kind of privacy elements. By the way, the flip side of the same thing is sometimes the model owners don't want to disclose their model. Of course, today models is an IP of organizations, and that's the flip side. So if I'm a model owner that has this amazing model that can predict the best diet, that's my IP, and I may not be willing to share it with the world. And that's the other side of the first challenge, that one can all protect the model or the data being used. The second kind of challenge is where basically you want to combine data from multiple sources in order to train a better model or utilize a better model. And here I'll give an example of one of the triggers that actually caused me to start Duality. I was the chief data scientist at RSA, the big security IT security company. And one of our products was really models to detect financial crime. And in order to detect financial crime, you look at the fraudulent data, train a machine learning model to come up with a better prediction to predict fraud. And it was clearly seen that if you train a model on a data coming from one bank that has a kind of set of attacks that that bank experienced, you get a model that may detect these fraud patterns in a very good way, but the minute a new pattern comes in, the model cannot detect it. And so the way to address this is if you train a fraud model on data coming from multiple banks. The minute that comes from multiple banks, you see many, many types of fraud attacks. And at RSA, we were doing that. So I could clearly see that the value of the model that we created was not based on the algorithm itself, but was clearly based on how much diversity and how much data you get from different banks in that case. But we see it all over. Of course, in the medical space, if you want to do a clinical trial and you want to basically combine data from multiple research centers, and if you want to learn any kind of behavior habits, you want to get data from multiple entities and environments. So that's kind of challenge number 2. How do you basically train on data coming from multiple organizations, but at the same time allow these organizations to protect the data? Let's just take the example of fraud between banks. It makes sense that you want to train on data from multiple banks, but it's not trivial that the banks will share this data, which is highly sensitive in the financial space. And obviously, when we look at kind of medical data, exactly the same thing. You're doing a clinical study and you're working with 10 different centers. You want to all analyze this data, but the data is highly sensitive. So the second challenge is really this ability to analyze and train models where the data is distributed across different entities. And the third challenge, which is even more, I would say, interesting and future looking in that sense, is what I mentioned about the ability to combine different dimensions of the same problem. So let's look at us as human beings. When we try and address a problem, we typically take many types of data, many types of inputs into consideration. Let's just say I want to go and buy a house. So I look, of course, at the neighborhood. I look at the size of the house. I look at who the neighbors are, how is the education, what is the price projections, and so on. So I look at many, many different dimensions of the problem to make a decision. In our business world, we're still not there. We're starting to get there now with the more advanced models, but you would like that exact same thing to happen. If one could combine its financial data with its medical data, with its behavioral data, with its wearable data, take all these kind of insights into consideration, one could come up with a much, much better model or much, much better outcome. But of course, this data is highly, highly sensitive. So there is a big desire to basically create a much more robust, a much more complete representation of a customer, of an entity, of a patient, while combining data from multiple sources. But this, of course, has to be done in a privacy-preserving manner. So basically, these are the 3 challenges Duality addresses: protecting data models using AI, the ability to run it in a federated setting where the data is distributed, or this ability to link together data sets, or for better training, or for better inference models, and doing all of this while protecting the data. So getting the value out of it while making sure privacy is maintained, IP is maintained, security is maintained, and so on.
There are several approaches to get to these outcomes out there in the market. Talk about your specific approach. How do you go about enabling this?
So there are, as you mentioned, there are many different approaches to this. By the way, the field as a category is called privacy preserving technologies or privacy enhancing technologies, PETs as an acronym. And there are technologies, we're not going to go into all of them, like using multi-party computation, which is one way to do it. using homomorphic encryption, which is a technology we master, which is actually analyzing data while encrypted. There's concepts of federated learning, synthetic data, differential privacy. There's a lot of different types of technology. What's unique about Duality is that we have a platform that really supports all technologies, and we focus on the use case. One of the challenges in this market, which is a new market, is that different vendors pop up with a specific technology. And by the way, the different technologies are used for different problems, and it's not one versus the other. It's more complementary. For example, a technology called synthetic data generates synthetic data, as it sounds, which is very good to maybe train a model or to get an initial estimate on it. But obviously, you can't get an accurate model on synthetic data. And even if you can, you can't serve a person. I cannot give you a better diet recommendation on the synthetic data. I have to have your specific data. So that's kind of one example. Federated learning is a great example where the data stays where it resides, but there has to be some kind of communication between the different edges that can reveal some information. So the federated concept is very valuable because you don't have to move data to the center, and what's moved is only a representation of it. So it does protect privacy, but in some cases, even that can reveal. So without going into too much detail, these different technologies are complementary, and the Duality platform basically supplies all of them. So we come to our customers and we solve their use case, and behind the scenes, our platform really knows to integrate all these capabilities into one platform, including also trusted execution environments, which are hardware solutions, and provide the customer at the end of the day the right solution for their problem. So I think that's one of the unique value props of Duality. We didn't start there, by the way. We started as a pure homomorphic encryption company, but working with the market, working with the customers, we expanded to this kind of broad platform that basically addresses any type of data collaboration or secure data collaboration.
What would be some of your favorite case studies of deploying Duality at your customers?
I think the place where we started with was the place that was an industry that knows to master data, an industry that the data is highly sensitive, and an industry that is already trying to collaborate or do this kind of sharing of data. And looking at these three elements, we got to the financial crime market, where, of course, financials already have data. They've normalized the data. They know to use the data. They already are doing some level of data sharing when they investigate financial crime cases, and the data is highly sensitive. So that's where we started. I would say classical examples there are, for example, anti-money laundering, where nearly by definition, the criminals in this case, be it kind of people that are doing money laundering or financing terror or human trafficking, all these kind of bad things for society, the way they actually generate the money is by moving it between banks and between financial organizations. So you actually lose track of who's behind these activities. And the only way to basically reveal this is if you start to collaborate between these different financial institutes. So that was like a natural starting point where both the legislation supported it, the regulation supported, there was a clear need and know how to do it. So we started there. That was like a clear starting point. And over time, we evolved also into other use cases. I think the place that is maybe the most potential is really in the healthcare space, where it's still, as people, as patients, we have many facets of our own healthcare environment. And that's one of the classical places where bringing data together can provide a lot of value. But that's where I really see a lot of potential. But our starting point was in financial services, and by the way, in government investigations, places where governments want to do analysis on public and private data without really disclosing sensitive information.
I see. And healthcare for sure will be a huge market for this type of products because the regulation forces us to preserve privacy in the most rigorous way out of all markets, I think. So definitely a huge potential there.
There's also a very interesting angle in healthcare. Um, let's just take this classical example where you want to look at a person's genomic data or look at the genomic mutations and try and correlate this to some kind of clinical condition. This is a classical problem where people are looking for what's called biomarkers. What kind of genomic mutations indicate some kind of clinical outcome? Now, there's two changes here. Nearly by definition, these are two kind of data, separate data sets. The providers have your clinical data, and genomic companies have your genomic data. So like typically these don't reside in the same place. So you have to basically bring them virtually to the same place and link them. Now, under HIPAA laws or under any privacy laws, in order to really share data and work on data without using advanced technologies like the Duality, you have to what's called de-identify the data sets. What does that mean? You take the clinical data set and you remove a identity indication. So if Alon Kaufman is one of the people in the cohort, you basically delete any identifiers that Alon Kaufman is there. The same you have to do with the genomic data, but then the minute you've done this, you cannot link them together. You cannot link Alon's genomic data with Alon's clinical data. So nearly inherently in healthcare, there's the need to do this linking. Nearly inherently, the data is highly sensitive and needs to be protected. And you still want to do these computations. And basically in our platform, we do all of these linkage and computations while the data stays, in this case, encrypted at all times and can never really be disclosed to anyone. But still, you can derive the insight, in this case, for example, what mutation is highly correlated to some kind of clinical outcome.
And you also talk about responsible AI in your documentation. What exactly do you mean by this?
All these cases we've been discussing are cases where there's some hesitance to share the data. Sometimes the challenge is really, in terms of regulations. You have to meet regulations. Sometimes the challenge is in terms of protecting privacy. Sometimes the challenge is really companies protecting their own IP. So you're allowed to do it. There's no privacy, but now I'm not going to give you my data because in my data, it's highly sensitive. And so when we talk about our platform, we talk about doing these data collaborations in a responsible way. Responsible AI has many facets around it. It has facets around privacy, as I said, safety, fairness, explainability, and so on. So there's a whole family of things which basically boil down to allowing the data owner to know what is done with this data, to make sure that it doesn't leak, to make sure that any kind of usage of it is highly controlled, and that the engine that you're running it against is certified. All of these things are basically done with different types of privacy enhancing technologies or cryptography kind of elements, which our platform does. So I may be talking a lot about privacy, but when I say privacy, it's basically all these elements that protect both the usage of the data, disclosing IP, the security elements, the regulatory elements, and so on. So that's responsible AI is a term that we use in a more general kind of sense.
I see. Basically, you're talking about being able to deploy AI and operate with data in a way that is the right way or the appropriate way for the type of data and for the type of organizations that are collaborating, and making sure that whatever they want, whatever the regulation wants them to do, whatever they want to do because of their business interests, you can enable with your platform.
Yes. And if we're looking at this world of where language models is taking us and ChatGPT and so on, probably we'll find ourselves that different types of models are being certified or regulated. Again, as someone utilizing these models, you need to have some kind of assurance that, hey, that the data wasn't hindered with, that the model wasn't hindered with, and that the model is really the model that you expected to answer your question. These are all kinds of elements of basically what we call data collaboration, and making sure that you do it in a responsible way or a way that you know exactly what your data is used for, by whom, and that it's certified.
When I look at your team, I see very interesting people like Professor Shafi Goldwasser, a Turing Award winner. And in general, it's quite a established and renowned team. Can you talk more about how did you put it together? How did you convince those people to join? And overall about how did you go about building your team?
Yeah, so we're very, very proud, of course, of our founding team, which really has these highly, highly esteemed academic people that uh, basically put the foundations for all this field that is called secure computing. I just have to correct you. It's not me putting the team together. It's basically three forces kind of bringing us all together. I would say on one hand, we have the more academic or cryptography side, which includes really Professor Shafi Goldwasser that has a Turing Award, which is basically the Nobel Prize in computer science for her work of 3 decades in secure computing, which is what we've done. We have Professor Vinod Vainkuntanathan. He actually used to be Shafi's student. He's now an MIT professor. He just won the Gödel Award the last year as well. And he's the one behind a lot of the algorithms that are making what we do very practical. And our CTO, Dr. Kurt Roholf, was working on these concepts way before Duality with DARPA, which is the research element or research arm of the Department of Defense in the US. They were working on these problems more on academic angle, and after feeling that it's time to mature, they wanted to find a way to commercialize it. And that's where they met Rina Shainsky, our fourth co-founder, that for many years was a VC in Israel. 16 years she was at Viola Ventures, leading investments. And the three of them met up with Rina to basically see how they can commercialize these technologies. And I would say in a parallel world, I was just coming out of RSA. I had this huge passion towards data science and combining data together. My PhD is in computational neuroscience. So for many years, I was basically working in the space of developing analytical tools to address business problems. And wherever I went, it was all about really combining data in various settings. I mentioned the fraud one before. I've done it also in neuroscience, bioinformatics, and so on. But at the same time, being at RSA, I really saw that the world is being challenged by these privacy concerns, and that data collaboration is something that in a regulatory aspect as well as in a privacy aspect is becoming challenging. So I always look at it like the academics were trying to look to commercialize their know-how. I had the problem, and Rina, that I knew for many years, is the one that actually done this marriage and created this very, very special and unique company that I would say at the right time met together to address probably one of the biggest challenges looking forward, which is really this ability to utilize AI, to do it in a collaborative or in a cloud central kind of metric, and doing it while protecting privacy or in a responsible way. And like all things just emerge together to create Duality. And so definitely I can't say that I convinced them, but we all came together and founded the company.
It's a great way, I think, when business and academia and venture capital can be combined together to build something great. And congratulations to you for having such a great, a strong team. That is, it's a tough challenge to build this type of products and this type of company. So you have to have a top-notch team to go after it, and it's great that you guys all have it. So I think talent density is one of the things that is unique about Duality team. But what are the other things you would say are unique about your team and company?
So excellent question, and I think one of the main things in Duality is that everyone in Duality is really passionate about our mission and vision. So I think like the number one thing to join Duality and the number one thing that keep people at Duality is really people that strongly believe in our vision, basically the vision of really creating a secure, collaborative digital world. That's what we are after. That's why we're not after a specific technology or a specific vertical. We want to really create this world it's a digital world that knows to utilize data in a responsible and secure way. And so it's people that are really passionate about this activity. And that's kind of definitely number one. And in order to get these people passionate, they're people that really respect this deep science that we're dealing with, people that really understand the value of data. So we really combine these disciplines of machine learning and encryption together. And there's not many people in the world that combine them. If you look at it like, it's a little bit like water and oil, because encryption is basically taking data and hiding it, adding noise to it, so you basically can't find the signal in the data. Machine learning does exactly the opposite. It takes data and it tries to find out the signal. So one would look at it as two very, very different sides of it. One is trying to hide the needle in the haystack, and the other one is trying to find the needle in the haystack. So there's two very kind of different approaches, but in terms of the origins of this, which is information theory, they actually come from the same space. So anyone in Duality is passionate about combining these two things to really advance this field in a way that we believe is the right thing for society. That's number one. The second rule is a simple rule. We want people to come with a smile on their face to work. And in order to come with a smile on your face, there's a lot of things that have to happen. But that's like a kind of a basic rule. You want to believe in what you're doing. You want to make sure that the people you're working with, you respect them highly, both in their personalities as well as in terms of their know-how. And you also want to be in a company that cares for you at least as much as you care for the company. So I think these are things that from day one, when we created the company, we kind of made sure that, it's people that are passionate about our mission and that it's a fun place to work in the sense that people come with a smile. We also invest a lot in our values that are highly correlated to what we do. So if we talk about collaboration as a product of Duality, collaboration is a key element in our values in terms of teamwork, in terms of transparency, in terms of really having the ability to coordinate and work between groups. So I would say that's kind of a key element, that your values and what the value prop of the company align together. There's also something that I like to call out. When you do what's called deep tech, or when you're taking a new technology to a new market and basically creating a market, it's very hard to find people that done exactly that. Basically, it's impossible to find people that done exactly that because we're doing it for the first time. But at the same time, you want experienced people. So one of the key elements in Duality is that people need to know to learn and evolve quickly. We don't know exactly what to do in all aspects. So the key thing here is to try out things, analyze them, debrief. If it's working, great. If it's not working, quickly iterate, see how you can fix things and bring more impact. And wherever we operate, if it's on the business side, on the technical side, on company management side, wherever we are, learning, iterating to bring impact is a key value that we also have built in. And it's a must when you're doing, I think, any startup, but definitely if you're trying to bring a new kind of concept to a totally new market.
They learn and evolve quickly is definitely an important thing for every startup. I think for the company that is trying to build something completely new, and especially if it's in a field that requires a lot of hard science, that multiplies this demand many times, because without it you can kind of drown in hard science and stay there for many years without shipping the products, because you will be you will not be agile enough to deliver. Is that the thinking behind it?
You're bringing up a very interesting point. So when you work with, I would say, kind of the academic side, and definitely so kind of esteemed academic people, academics are really what they solved already is behind them. The fact that it takes many, many cycles of development to release it to the market is less of an interest to them. And they always to the next big challenge. And they're always trying to do it in a very rigorous way. I would say a classical startup, which is maybe building a better mousetrap kind of thing, has to really just evolve quickly and run quickly. And Duality has to do both. So our science is very, very deep, but we have to build very big products. And one of the unique things in the setting of the people is people that appreciate the deep science and understand that in order to go to the market, you don't have to have everything from day one settled. You have to understand the value prop. You have to iterate and try out things much quicker. So this kind of combination, it's a duality within duality, having a strong scientific side as well as a very strong kind of go-to-market and product side, combining these two things together. And it's not a surprise that a lot of the team emerged from different types of innovation environments within companies. I myself came also from an innovation environment, having an academic background as well as a business background, and really trying to kind of settle these two things. And that's important, really, to know to do this balance and drive traction in the market, but at the same time continue to advance the deep scientific foundations of the company.
Yeah, it's definitely harder than just going after traction. But I see how the most iconic companies that have been built around, those are the ones that can effectively combine these two flows. You talk about building a new category with duality. And this is usually a very hard thing for any startup, for a small company to go after creating a new category and educating the market. So, what's your recipe to win there? How do you go about it?
Excellent question. And this is something that I wish I had a winning recipe, but we're trying to win and figure it out as we go. I think there's three elements here. First, nearly by definition, if you're creating a new market, you're probably also doing it with a new technology. So these technologies that we master with, and I even mentioned that we added more and more technologies as we advanced, are still in the step of like being developed and being enhanced as we move. So like you constantly have to stay ahead of the curve and a leader in the space. But then at the same time, because they're complex technologies, you have to build a product with very high levels of usability. So this challenge of a complex technology, but you don't want your customer to be in the needs and greeds of everything. You want to have a product that is easy to use, easy to consume, even though the technology is complex. And that's using kind of a lot of product engineering stuff, but also making sure that the product itself is intuitive, can guide you, and so on. So that's kind of on the technology level. The second thing is as a startup, but even generally, if you're trying to build a new market, you have to focus. You can't try and kind of convince all the market at once. That's why we chose to start with financial services. We then expanded to government. We're now doing healthcare and the manufacturing. But you first have to focus because you can't teach the whole world everything. Even within financial services, this huge space. So we started by focusing, and that's the second element. And the third element is that part of your marketing, part of your thought leadership, part of what you do has to be a lot of education. And here, having people on your team like Professor Shafi Goldwasser, that's like a world-known expert in this field, is really, really important. I don't think you can easily do it if you don't have like the right pedigree, if you don't have the right personnel behind you. So we have an amazing set of advisors on our advisory board, people like Michael Jordan, who leads machine learning out of Berkeley, of course, Shafi and Vinod, the founders. We have people that came out of regulators in the States. We have Mike Rogers, who used to be the ex-NSA director. So we assembled a very, very strong advisory team around us to make sure that there's visibility, but also we can do this education and a lot of thought leadership. And then the fourth thing I would say, when you're doing a new market, your competition in many cases, or you're also competition or cooperators when you educate the market. So there's no need in a new market to fight fiercely your competition. There's much more value in working together to educate the market than fighting on one or two accounts. And although it's again a problem of collaboration or doing it in a secure way, I think the all young markets understand how to do it together in a very clever way. And really, we all, in some sense, cooperate around really this market education exercise. But it's definitely not an easy challenge. And I definitely can't say we have a recipe, but making sure the technology is easy, that you focus, that you are a thought leadership, and not going against the stream, but trying to join forces is probably the four elements I would recommend people trying to build a new or create a new category.
Double clicking on that focus thing, I think that's a challenge for a lot of horizontal types of startups. They want, on one hand, to focus. On the other hand, it seems like they're afraid to lose customers from other segments if they focus on one particular, or they're afraid that competition will take other segments and then will overcome them. And that leads them to stretching their focus into many segments instead of picking one. What's your thinking on that?
So first of all, you're 100% correct, and it's always a challenge: focus versus being opportunistic. So uh, two aspects. One, you have to focus in order to run quicker. And it took us some time to understand where we want to focus. But once we discovered that we want to start in the financial services and specifically in financial crime, we very, very kind of in a dedicated way went over it. But at the same time, our go-to-market or strategy to like not lose out what is to work with partners. So working with partners is basically like with a bigger size and so on. And some of our partnerships are on our website. We actually enable them, we educate them, and then they sell our technology or work with us in other use cases. So as a small company, you cannot build a dedicated sales force to go after healthcare, to go after financials, government, uh, telcos, manufacturing, and so on. But if you enable your partners, they can do it. So I would say there's two elements here: A, focusing on really building your kind of ground and really going from market to market, and in parallel to that, working with partnerships. And we're very proud of our partnerships and the business that they bring in for us. And I think that's a key element in a strategy, specifically if you are a horizontal company.
Yeah, lots of successful companies went through this route in a space of data and analytics. Pretty much, I think everyone went that way because it's impossible, yeah, to go after each and every company themselves. And there is
Sure.
already a huge environment of those integrators that are happy to do that for you, assuming that your product is the best in the market. But it's, yeah, so focus on building the great product and then let them do their piece. That's basically your advice.
Yes, yes.
Okay. When you look at the current market landscape of privacy enhancing technologies, what would you say? Where are we in terms of early adopters, early majority? Where are we on that adoption curve? And what will be needed? What will be the inflection points that will move the adoption to the next levels?
Excellent question. In the sense that the answer really differs based on the different segments. So I would say in the government space, and we do quite a lot of work with governments, it's more mature. They know what they need. They've designed the solutions, and they need different types of PETs, privacy enhancing technologies, or a platform like Duality. And although the sales cycles may be longer, um, they're very clear in what they need. You need less education there, and it's more really being excellent and really driving the business there. So I would say that they more, it's still not commonly used, but they're much more advanced on the curve. The other spaces where we like really, as I mentioned before, financial institutes that already know to utilize data, have data, already are doing collaborations between different environments. They get it, but they are still, like I would say, in the early stage of the markets. In other areas, it's more the innovators, maybe in healthcare. We're already starting to see more and more healthcare organizations starting to build connected data assets and driving it, but that's still, I would say, the innovators. And these, all the industries that I mentioned are industries that the data is highly sensitive. In other industries like marketing, like automotive and so on, the data is sensitive, but it's still not at the level of regulation or protection like in other markets. So there, it's really only the innovators that are starting to look at it. So if I like draw a picture, it really varies according to the verticals, and some are more mature than others. Eventually, I have no question that this will impact any um, industry in the world, because the more and more we learn, every kind of data that is collected is becoming highly, highly valuable. And with this new world of AI and learning models, we can just see, like, basically from any piece of data, you can derive anything. So I'm sure as we go to the future, more and more industries will use these technologies. But in order to get there, there's a challenge of the regulators requiring this or regulating to make sure that privacy is protected. So there's some places where there's not enough regulations, and there's other places where the regulations have to approve the usage of these technologies. So that's one challenge or barrier or inflection point that will drive this forward. And the second one is still, these set of technologies are still rather novel. It's still the cell cycle and the learning cycle is still relatively more complex to a simple product that you just install and start using. So though we're doing all we can to make it easy, and we have sandboxes and self-guiding tools and so on, it's still not a market ready for just kind of dropping the software into the organization and starting to use it. That will probably take another few years to get there to cover all markets.
Get you. But it does move really quickly. And in a lot of sense, it follows the adoption of the AI technologies themselves on one hand, and on the other hand, it follows the regulation. So if the speed of regulation, the speed of adoption of AI technologies together, they create the fertile soil to deploy the privacy enhancement technologies.
You're correct, because even if you just look at a year ago, talking about ethical AI, responsible AI, it was a field that people spoke about, but hardly people spoke about it. Now, in the last 2 months, after we see all this AI coming out and the breaches and so on, everyone is now worried about ethical AI and responsibility. So it definitely, the space is moving very, very fast. There's now talks about regulating AI models. It used to be only in the medical space where you wanted to regulate these things, or in automotive. Now it's across the board. And so you're definitely correct. The pace is very high, and the need is growing at a very high pace as well. And so it's really a matter of months versus years before that this thing is really starting to advance.
For the organizations interested in figuring out this strategy for them, the data collaboration, secure data collaboration strategy for them, what would be your advice to them? How should they approach it?
My kind of advice would be, um, first of all, ignoring a second security privacy regulation, which and thinking, if you didn't have any privacy or security or data protection challenges, what types of data would you be using? What types of models would you be using? Who would you be collaborating with? Where in the world? What type of data, and so on? And driving from the business side first. Once you figure out what you want, to have a mental model of what type of data you want and where it is and so on, then obviously comes on the questions, hey, but I'm not allowed to go there because of cross-border regulations. Hey, but I'm not willing to share my data because of sensitivity. Hey, I can't do this because of privacy. When these questions come in, that's when you come and say, okay, now with these questions, you bring in a platform like the Duality. So we mustn't forget Duality is a means to solve the problems that are hindering or keeping us back from really utilizing data at its full potential. And I would start off by really thinking, what is this full potential? What would you like to do? What data silos do you want to break down? And then bringing in Duality to see how we address that in terms of all these aspects I mentioned about making sure that's the right model, the right data, the right controls, and protecting privacy and security.
Right. So basically, start with the assumption that there is no barriers, and then remove those barriers with Duality.
Exactly. Exactly. You put it much better than me.
I don't think so, but thank you. Uh, where people can learn more about your company, where can they follow you on social media?
So the easiest place is really in our website, dualitytech.com, or just reach out to info@dualitytech.com. So, and in our website, you can find, based on the use cases, you can download and or register to our sandbox and try out our product, and really register to a demo, and our team will be happy to reach out to you. The two things you have to keep in mind when doing it is who is collaborating? What is the analytics you want to do, and who are the parties that are collaborating? Sometimes this is between organizations. So let's say you're an insurance company and you want to collaborate with another insurance company. So that's a good example. But in many cases, it's also internal use cases. For example, your HR department wants to be looking at the data in a privacy preserving manner, or your data scientists, you want them to develop models without being exposed to sensitive data. So it doesn't always have to be collaboration between two organizations. It can be a collaboration within your organization, but there has to be a basic requirement that there's at least two entities or more that are trying to do something together. If you have that kind of challenge or that kind of problem that you want to do it in a protected way and a controlled way, please reach out to us and we'll be happy to engage and see how we can help you.
Sounds good. We'll add all those links to the show notes so everyone can go and check them out. Alon, thanks a lot for joining me today. It was a great pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.